the aftercare panel. We have an esteemed group of speakers here, so I am thrilled to listen in and hear about where we've come with aftercare, and there's some leaders that really, and I'm looking at Stacie here, that have really brought aftercare to the forefront through the TAA, and then there's folks that are looking to take this to the next level. So I'll turn it over to Jill as our moderator.
All right, thank you so much, Robert. And
again, just quiet down, please. Thank you.
Yeah, do I have to pretend I'm in school here and everybody? Quiet down, class. Let's pay attention. So thank you again for the RTIP for having us all here. I think we can all agree that thoroughbred aftercare, when they're done with their racing careers, we all have the same goal. We have to take care of these horses. So that is not something that this industry is in discourse over. We all agree with that goal. And how do we get there? How do we make sure that these horses that provide so much for all of us are given dignified life careers when their racing days are over? So we will definitely get into a lot of conversations about that. This is an esteemed panel, as Robert said, but everybody up here, and I think this is what's going to be so unique today, has kind of a different spot along the way in the thoroughbred aftercare. I know we've had a lot of conversations or people talking about using a different word along the way. So is it rehoming, retraining? We'll talk about a little bit of that. But I'm going to let our panel go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Jessica Hammond, and I'm the Executive Director of Beyond the Wire. We're a first exit from racing program located in Maryland. So when Pimlico was in play, I work at Laurel and Pimlico. And what I do is a trainer or owner will call me to retire a horse, and I'm right there at the track. I evaluate the horse along with a vet, collect medical documentation, set up shipping, and send the horse to one of our TAA accredited facilities. And our program also provides funding for these horses when they go onto the facilities. And we kind of collect the money from the industry, which we maybe will get into later on how we do that.
Stacie?
Hi, I'm Stacie Clark-Rogers. I'm with the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. I'm the operations consultant. We've been in existence since Good Conversations in 2011. We are an industry initiative, which is awesome. So the industry should be really proud of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance and its partners in aftercare. A lot of good things have happened. We have a lot to do. We've given away about $31 million in the last 12 years. We have 83 organizations that are accredited. So we do two things. We accredit and we help fundraise. And we help network and get collaboration with the organizations across North America.
Pat?
I'm Pat Cummings. I lead Mike Rapoli's National Thoroughbred Alliance initiative to seek improvement across the entire horse racing space. And in January of this year, Mike identified aftercare as the place to really start, and not just the nonprofit space, but identifying the entire opportunity to elevate, better fund, better resource, and build the retired racehorse ecosystem in American racing. And a lot of our work has been behind the scenes, working with different stakeholders, engaging them, trying to identify a funding model, which we can talk about later, and really identifying how to elevate the entirety of focus and attention on what happens in the majority of a thoroughbred's life, which is after the racetrack.
Jen?
Yeah.
My name's Jen Roytz, and my husband and I own Brownstead Farm in Versailles, Kentucky, just down the road from Keeneland. I've spent my career in the racing industry kind of with one foot on the marketing side and another foot on the aftercare side. I was the executive director for the Retired Racehorse Project for years. I sit on the communications committee for the TAA, and at our farm, we breed with the goal of selling as yearlings, and if they don't sell as yearlings, they go on to race for our farm. But we try to always buy back or get back our horses that we breed after racing to repurpose them either in the breeding industry at our farm if the current owner doesn't want to breed them or sell them as a brooding stock themselves, or retrain them and resell them as sport horses. So A lot of the horses that we breed, we end up selling twice in their lifetimes, every once in a while a third time if they come back to us after their first sport horse career for a second career. And then I also buy a handful off of the track every year to retrain and resell. So aftercare is really a significant part of our for-profit business model.
So we've heard it's always kind of easy for media to put out things that are going wrong, but also we do get a lot of really good success stories from these programs. So I want to talk a little bit about some of those. And I'll start with you first, Stacie, since you've been involved in this a lot and seeing where we have done well, can do well, and what we need to do going forward.
Yeah, I've been really fortunate. I worked for Mrs. Stronach at Adena Springs, and she started the first ever retiring program for thoroughbreds at their own farm. And so we did that for 10 years, and it was wonderful. There was no worry about budgets or anything. It was, we had lots of staff and lots of facilities, and it really did help us grow an understanding of what the horses could be used for. Parallel to our own experience was the development of RRP. It sort of started as I was leaving Adena and coming into the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, and the RRP started with the same sort of mentality that, hey, this horse can do a lot of things. This is not just a one-lined horse. So I think it's been pretty kismet that we've had great facilities and great interest from big owners. We need to do more, but we really have seen a history of development of the horse, the thoroughbred itself, being able to do a variety of different things, having, as Pat mentioned, more of their lifetime, which is a good 20 years sometimes after racing, have some value. 75% of their life is going to be after the racetrack. And as a sport, if we collaborate with the marketing presentation just before us, our best marketing tool is the horse. And if we really lean into that, we really have a good opportunity to save our sport.
And kind of what you touched on there, and I think that's another piece to this, is this isn't just about retirement or sanctuary. So there are those other careers for horses that retire. And so Jen, I'll kind of go to you for this. How do we get these horses? How do we make sure that people know, I know you have a Retirement Racehorse Project, know that there are horses out there that can still go on to other careers?
I mean, marketing's been like one of the buzzwords for this whole conference, I feel like. But marketing is a huge part of it. So for those that don't know what the RRP is, the Retired Racehorse Project, it's a 501c3, much like the TAA, but it takes a different approach to the same issue. So the RRP works to create demand and value for thoroughbreds after racing. They're not working to adopt them out themselves, but rather to create more of a market for them after racing, which then will help all of the TAA accredited facilities as well as for-profit trainers who are selling these horses after racing get more horses sold for a better amount of money. So I think marketing is a huge issue because you need to create that demand and kind of change the mindset of the equestrian general public that isn't really racing savvy. They probably don't have a great perception of racing based on how the mainstream media has covered it. I mean, just yesterday when I was getting my rental car and the woman asked why I was in town, I told her that I was speaking here about aftercare, and the first thing she mentioned, she is not racing or horse savvy, were the breakdowns at Santa Anita, and I didn't even know that horses could go on to a second career. And so from an equestrian's mindset, if they're trying to buy an animal that they can go either have fun with recreationally or go and compete with either recreationally or for actual money, they want something that's going to be sound and durable and trainable and a good partner for them. And they oftentimes, money is not an object. So they're not looking for the cheapest thing they can get. They're looking for something that's going to be easy to train and be sound for a long time. So I think the whole idea of marketing to that audience outside of the racing industry, the equestrian audience, to kind of reshape what a thoroughbred is in their mind. It's not just a racehorse, these are sport horses. They're purpose-bred to be sport horses. I think we can do a lot to change that perception.
So the four of us, the girls up here, sorry Pat, but we're all the horse crazy ones. We all have ridden, we've all done all of that. And so now, you're up here, a new and different perspective a little bit from a different area, which to me, we always need people that aren't necessarily so deep in the weeds in this to see it a little bit from an outside. So I know you had some things you want to kind of talk about what the NTA is doing and how you all see this.
Yeah, I've been coming to the symposium, I think, since 2011, and it's always been in a wagering business or technology-related field. And all my work prior, immediately to joining with Micropoli has been research on wagering and wagering business topics. And Mike had seen some of that, but said, look, I want to take you and I want you to dive into this space, learn as much as you can, identify what the opportunities are, and how this might be able to be changed for the future. Well, I've both loved what I've seen and hated what I found. The people are amazing, unbelievably dedicated, despite a lack of organized support. They have fought through decades of essentially just not having enough funding, and have, the number of individuals at the racetrack level, the horsemen's group level, individual nonprofits, farm owners, facility owners that have essentially bootstrapped their way to create facilities and programs and incentive opportunities that will look after and facilitate the transition of horses to their next careers has been amazing. But what I have found from being involved with the Retired Racehorse Project, which is an amazing event, and I joined the board a couple months ago, most of the participants are not in any way, shape, or form cognizant of racing and racing ongoings. They are horse people. They want to participate with horses. They want to buy horses, ride them, compete with them, love them. And I don't think there's been as strong a connection between the thoroughbred racing and breeding industry and the next career opportunities for those thoroughbreds, which is likely to be 3 to 4 times longer than their racing career. And so I think we have a chance to really flip the script, to build more residual values in our thoroughbreds, to create more incentives for people to buy them, to leave horses in a state and in a position when they're done racing that they will be able to more quickly transition into these other careers. There was a horse that ran in July at Ellis Park that competed in the Thoroughbred Makeover in October. This is a horse that had been on the racetrack and competed in a competitive trail division, which is sort of like a low-impact obstacle course for horses. And, I was mesmerized. I don't think the racing side of the business recognizes the flexibility, the durability, and the mental flexibility of a horse outside of the racetrack. And look, if half of our horses end up as geldings and are not going into the breeding cycle, we need to build better pathways through the space. And the work that has already been done and the foundations that are laid are wonderful. We want to help take it to the next level.
So Jessica, with Beyond the Wire, you're kind of that first stop, the first call for an exit strategy, so to speak, for a horse. So just kind of take us through what are some of the things that you're seeing now? I know when you and I talked, you said, and this has been kind of a topic of conversation here, with the advent of HISA, you're seeing a lot more horses now coming to you that owners, trainers want to, get off their books, so to speak, but you put it in the term of risk. And so can you explain a little bit what you're seeing now and how you're adjusting for any of this?
Well, one of the tough parts of my job has always been that owners and trainers want to get the horses off their books before HISA was even, in effect. When somebody decides a horse wants to, they're going to retire a horse that needs to retire, they want it gone yesterday a lot of the time, which puts a lot of pressure on people in my position and kind of trickles down the line and touches, all of the aftercare kind of industry. Since HISA has been put in effect, I've definitely had comments made to me when horses are being retired that I'm going to retire this horse because of HISA, I can't run him again, I don't want to get in trouble sort of thing. That's how it should have been to begin with. It shouldn't have taken HISA to do that. But, you know, I know that there are things about HISA that are controversial, and I understand the controversy. I have a lot of experience in racing outside of aftercare. I was an owner, my husband was a trainer, my son works for a very prestigious breeding farm in Kentucky. So I get the controversy, I get both sides of a lot of it, but the fact of the matter is a lot of the times these horses should have been retired sooner anyway, HISA or not. So it's benefited us in that regard. We have been getting more sounder horses because first of all, it's very hard to place a horse that's not sound, you know, and people aren't chomping at the bit to adopt something that's going to have a lot of limitations. And in my mind, first and foremost, it's unethical. You know, our job is to take care of them. They're athletes, but if you're good at your job, you're managing those athletes to the best of your ability and keeping their longevity in mind. Yeah, so I think the people at the track, that shows the kind of job, the kind of reputation they have. You have to kind of think about, you know, down the line, you want to have a reputation as somebody that manages horses well. But yeah, HISA being put into effect it's helped us.
So, I mean, in the end, really, there's economics are a big factor, and funding, fundraising for the aftercare or another career for a horse. So we know that's a big topic. And Stacie, I'll start with you. You know, how have we approached this? What's worked? What additionally do we need to do? Because the life cycle of a horse, from the day somebody decides what that breeding, that mating is going to be, till its end, all these people that touch that horse along the way, should they be held responsible and accountable for that horse?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. When the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance first started, in the conversations, Jen was there, some of you in the room were there, the idea was that we would effectively have an assessment fee along the horse's life. So from registration to you know, claiming fees, and you know, the van companies would participate. And what we noticed around 2017 was, as John Phillips coined it, the on-ramps became off-ramps. So if you gave it the sale, you didn't think you should have to give it the racetrack. And so, you know, somebody would look and go, well, I've given 4 different times. It didn't matter that it would add up to less than $100. It just felt like they were constantly being told what to do with their money. And I'm not here to debate that. I think that we realized that the touch point model doesn't always work, and we do have to have other sustainable models of funding. Interesting, last week I got a call from Hong Kong, and so they have no land. We have lots of land. They saw a video at the International Aftercare thing this year in Japan where somebody shot a great drone shot of Wyoming. It looked like so much land. They're like, so can we send all our horses to Wyoming? We'll send you what is required in Hong Kong, 100,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is about 15 grand US, right? With each horse, and we'll fly it there. And so you're kind of like, well, geez, you don't want to tell the groups not to take them because we have so many on Jessica and other placement programs waiting list. But the disconnect is Hong Kong gets it off the top, and we're trying to fix it like it's, you know, like how I buy clothes, like I'll pay for it later, right? So you want to really figure out what's going to happen with the horse in the beginning, and we have to change that mindset, and we really have to recognize it's all of our responsibility because, like we said in the beginning, the horse is everything. And as Michael Blowen will say from Old Friends, if we put the horse first, we won't have any of these issues, whether the medication reform or aftercare.
So Pat, same question for you. You have thoughts, Mike Rapoli has thoughts on funding and taking care of our horses.
Yeah, it can't be a choice. It just can't be anymore. I think what we're seeing now is that by leaving it exclusively to choice, we have been left with an entire ecosystem that is perpetually underfunded. And this summer, I called about a quarter of the TAA accredited facilities and just asked them, how many horses do you have? How many horses can you feed? There is space, but they only have enough horses that they can actually feed. Right? There is open inventory space in sanctuary facilities across America. Not all, but it's there. It's that I just can't feed more. I don't have the funding.
I want to read something to that point. So, and it kind of goes with this. It's like people don't like to donate to a place where they already think the horse is safe. So once they've made it to that facility, it's kind of like, okay, the horse is safe now. I'm not worried about it anymore.
There's a tremendous ongoing series from the Pollock Report right now. Natalie Voss is doing it, talking about the kill pen economy. I've had some experience with it this year and talking to different participants within it and understanding it. And it's very clear that people are very interested in giving money when they think a horse may be sent to slaughter, or that that's being dangled as a threat. And then once the bail money has been paid and this extortion event has come to its conclusion, someone has that horse, and no one is interested in paying at that point, right? That's the reality of the modern day system. Our perspective is create a funding model. The numbers do not have to be set in stone until all the parties agree on what that's going to look like. So the model that we are creating and have socialized across various industry organizations, some have said, that's great, I'm for it, I'm willing to go with it. Others have said, this is way too much, not interested, go fix it, come back with lower numbers. And others say, I'm not interested in the numbers, I'm interested in how it gets used. So you have varieties of acceptance or rejection at this point. But I'll just lay it out very simply. If you're buying or selling at a sale, 0.25% on the receipt. So on a $100,000 sale purchase, the buyer pays $250 and the seller pays $250. The house will top it up with 0.1%. There seems to be relative agreement within the sales companies to do that. So on a $100,000 purchase, you generate $600 that goes into a general aftercare pool, TBD on how that gets used between TAA and other incentive programs, and maybe even a grander vision for an overall organization that maybe is elevated. At the racetrack, at least $50 per start. At least $50 per start. There are racetracks in America that take 50 cents per start.
So is that 50, though, coming out of the owner's take from the race, or is it a racetrack responsibility? The racetrack
we would think
ownership.
it would come from the owners, almost like 10th place gets $125, and that's essentially a mount fee, and that really comes off the winner's share, right, is where that's really coming from. At $50 a start, 200,000 starters a year, that is, mind you, much less than the total number of starters a year at present, but we don't expect you to be able to get it from everywhere. That's $10 million, and roughly, I think about 7 of that would be new money into aftercare programs. From the auctions, what I talked about, the sales, right now the sales companies are probably putting about $1.3 million that comes from house contributions and checkoff programs and some small mandatory contributions at the sales. $1.3 million versus our vision should be about $8 million at last year's total sales receipts. The commercial breeders have to get involved, right? If Into Mischief stands for $250,000 and the only aftercare contribution that comes out of that is the report of mare's bred fee to the Jockey Club of $37, we're kidding ourselves.
So
it's wholly
Jessica,
unacceptable.
Yeah, no, you have something to say.
I think you mentioned earlier on like what's working kind of and what can be improved. And one of the things that I just want to make clear that I think is a good thing and maybe different in the past, I don't know, 10 or so years, is that we are getting money from every aspect of the industry. Our program, that's one of the things that I'm proud of and I think is cool about it, and I think there's a lot of other jurisdictions that are doing very similar things. And you know, our funding comes from the track itself, track ownership, the horsemen's group, the jockey colony, there's per start charges to owners, there's a claiming percentage fee. I'm proud of, the horse breeders. So at least in Maryland and in many other places, the whole industry is contributing, which is fantastic. You know, everybody's kind of getting on board. This is a subject on people's minds. They're aware of it. They're giving money. That's a good thing. The thing that needs to be improved in my mind is, and from what I've seen, is it just needs to be more now. You know, the cost of everything has gone up. It was never enough money to begin with to cover expenses. And there's two ladies that I work with that run aftercare facilities. They actually take the horses, retrain them. I'm very fond of them. They do a wonderful job. They're both TAA accredited facilities. So they meet high standards of care and adoptions, but they don't even take a salary for themselves. One is a full-time accountant, and the other actually stopped taking horses from the racetrack because basically we as an industry were running them into the red constantly. They kept the horses that they had from us, and they're going to use these in therapy programs. So that's fantastic, and they're finding other ways to get grants through the work that they're doing. But that's the problem. Again, the good thing is that we're all involved and the whole industry is involved, but it needs to be more.
And Jen, to that point, you had said when we talked a bit about the business model for this and the idea that this is not a charitable effort. Mm-hmm. So just speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, when aftercare, the word aftercare became a word in the industry vernacular, it was always looked at as a charitable thing. And the TAA is a 501c3. All of the organizations they support are 501c3s and they're charities. And I totally understand and respect that a lot of the people in the industry, most of the people that race horses, don't have the luxury that we have, that have the skill set and the facility to be able to train the horses themselves. We still do send some of our horses to TAA accredited facilities, but we retrain and resell a lot more of them ourselves. But the industry over the years has looked at the aftercare portion of our business, not as a sector of our business, but just as a charitable endeavor. And it really needs to be part of anyone's business model. There's so many ways that you can responsibly have an aftercare plan. There's obviously the TAA accredited facilities. There's also a lot of agents on the backside and professionals who retrain horses as part of their business model at show stables and boarding stables, and it takes all of those to accommodate all of the horses exiting the industry every year, retiring from racing. So it really behooves us, if you have a racing stable, if you have a business that is invested in racing horses, it needs to be part of that business model to know how many horses you are going to estimate you'll exit from racing every year, build that into your budget. If they're going to a TAA accredited facility, you need to be supporting that facility with the appropriate funding and be mindful enough that you understand how much it costs to retrain a horse. Like when you were talking before about the kill pen scenario, we just pulled a horse out of a kill pen for a friend of ours, and by far the lowest portion of the whole overall cost of that is getting the horse out of there. It was $900 to buy him out of there. But then he needed to be quarantined. That's another $1,300. He needed to be shipped back to Kentucky. That was another $1,200. He needed to be vaccinated and make sure he didn't catch any kind of communicable disease. That was another veterinary charge. He had some pretty major issues in his ankles when he got there. So we've already invested probably $1,500 in just taking care of him physically from a veterinary standpoint, and that is with a husband who's a veterinarian. So it costs a lot to accommodate these horses when they're coming off of the track, when it's not done properly, when they're not retired, like Jessica is saying, when they're in better condition. So I really think it's important for the industry to understand how much it costs to transition these horses off of the track, and it just needs to become a common practice as part of your business model, not necessarily a feel-good $100 donation that you make at the end of the year.
Yeah, and Stacie, when we talked to you, had said something to me that just really hit home. You said that the horse is the only participant that doesn't get a piece of the purse.
Yeah,
and it's the horse, the thing that we all are so focused on taking care of. Everybody else is getting a piece of that purse, so the horse isn't. And another thing I want you to kind of touch on that you brought up is with today's gaming ownership of racetracks is money from racinos, casinos, how they should possibly contribute more?
Yeah, so I fundamentally feel when the systemic, the automatic funding that we have is okay right now. Our budgets for our organizations are probably around 75 million, and we only give them enough to sustain a portion of that. It was never our intention as the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance to be the funding model for them. And there are problems with that I won't go into, but if there's an expectation for an organization to get $100,000 a year, then they will budget on that. And then that will shorten their ability to bring more horses in. They'll be, we've given groups a grant and then they come back the next year and go, why is it smaller? We've been with you 2 years. And we'll be like, well, because you cut back in horses. So we grant based on performance as an incentive and to keep them accredited and keep going up. To the part of what you're talking about, I think what's difficult for us is to understand that this is a complex industry. We have 38 racing jurisdictions. Hong Kong has 1. We have, Australia's doing amazing things. Japan's doing amazing things. They have 2 or 3 racing jurisdictions, and so they have less politics involved in what's happening. So I think we really do have to be cognizant of where the money is coming from and who can afford the money, right? And what's happening to the horses, because our Achilles heel is not NYRA, our Achilles heel is not Stronach Group racetracks, our Achilles heel is not any of the elite racetracks, Keeneland or Oaklawn. Our Achilles heel is the casinos, because we all know the casinos would rather not have horse racing. Like, I'm going to say it, right? Because it's easier to not, and so we have difficulty from the TA perspective of getting participation with casino-owned racetracks to participate in funding. And that's a real problem, because those racetracks are the ones that have the most at-risk horses. Those are the kill pen show-ups.
That is where this horse came from.
And then there's a whole thing you don't want to know about called direct-to-kill, right? So that's a whole nother chapter, which I have a presentation on our desk that you can pick up, that sort of outlines that where a lot of it does seem like it's in the forefront, and we do seem to be doing a great job, and we are. This is the best equine sport of all of them. But the little racetracks that are not able to, and it's not a criticism, I want to be very clear, sometimes it's just their own economics. Selling your horse for $500 to a kill buyer is a good week, right? Not our good week, but that's important that we understand that not all racing is happening at the highest level of sales. And so we do need support, and we do get support from the big sales companies and the jockey club and big racing entities such as NYRA and First and Churchill Downs and Colonial. It's all been wonderful. But until we can get full participation, and we have those conversations that we need to get all of the racetracks involved, and it's the peers that have to do it. I can tell you, we haven't left a stone unturned in 12 years. We have many unreturned phone calls. Emily and I have spent lots of time trying to get people to take our call and say, hey, we just want something. We want a token. Give us $1,200 a year. Give us something that says you're inclusive to the bigger problem, which is all of our problem, because the kill pen horses, they're not coming out of Keeneland, right? And that whole social media thing that's happening to us, that's exposing the underbelly of any equine sport, is those guys know what they're doing. Like Natalie's, those guys they've set up their own boutiques of charities, so they call it, or horse rescue, and then they know who to call. They call the girls that Jessica and I know, and Jen, and they call them and go, hey, we got a horse. You want to call your friends. And then the thing explodes, and then you're spending $15,000 to get a horse out that may or may not survive.
And Pat, you had brought this up, and Stacie just touched on it at the beginning of that as well, the fragmented approach currently within our industry. And it is hard to ask for money for anything. It's hard to ask for money. Right? Horses are costly. Running a racetrack is costly. But again, accountability. So Pat, just kind of take that a little bit with, so how do we change? How do we make a non-fragmented, what can we do?
I think it starts with, again, making everyone as responsible as you can while you have those horses in the racing and breeding ecosystems. I think we need our institutions to be stronger. A group like the Jockey Club, who we've had some fantastic conversations with in recent months, started out by funding the TAA and continuing to through full registration and registry transaction fees. But the amount on those numbers has not really grown. It needs to. The sales companies, I think one of the reasons we've helped or tried to start with them as big institutions that reach from the top of the sport all the way down to the bottom, right? The book 6 horses, right, that go through the ring, that they're going to need a place. And if you start with getting portions on those transactions too, you're touching everybody as much as you can. You know, you need to have that touch point throughout the entirety of a horse's career, and then when they go back to the sales ring, right? There's tremendous research that is going on through private individuals, and a wonderful organization out of Kentucky called Mareworthy Charities, Kyle Rothfuss, who has spent a ton of time rescuing retired broodmares, senior broodmares, did a wonderful piece a few months ago talking about the senior broodmare population that ends up coming back through our sales rings at Keeneland, Fasig, and the data that he compiled by himself literally was a walking, talking policy advocacy paper that you could have taken to any sales company and said, you need to start changing your policies on selling these older broodmares. For $1,000 or $2,000, people are buying pregnant 18, 19-year-old broodmares. They'll take the foal, and the broodmare ends up in a kill pen. And you simply cannot continue to ignore the realities of the situation when a private individual running a 501c3 is running the data and a major sales company is not, right? The story is no longer, you can't hide from it anymore. So we could talk about funding plenty, but all these organizations need to be dedicating more time and effort. Stacie mentioned Australia, and it is a much simpler situation because of a smaller group of racing states that they have. But across those racing operators and at Racing Australia, they have 33 full-time employees who are working on post-racing equine welfare and aftercare-related programs. That's essentially from the state racing operators and the national body that oversees Racing Australia. The Jockey Club sort of has 1 or 2 people that work on this, and it's not their full-time role, right? There's wonderful people that work for programs at racetracks through horsemen's groups, like Jessica.
Well, and to what Jessica said, you have these people, they're volunteers, they're not taking salaries.
Yeah, it's the individuals who are doing it now are absolutely not a problem. It's that there need to be exponentially more of them, and the roles have not been created, the funding has not been there. It needs to evolve. And Micropoli's vision is that we need to be building this capability across the industry in an organized fashion. And right now, we have pockets of extreme success, of great things that are happening across aftercare. It's just nowhere near enough.
Right. And Jessica, you had mentioned about that, I guess, the for-profit versus the non-profit. I don't know if it's a versus, but that you're seeing a lot of people coming in and kind of cherry-picking the best potential retired horses to go on to other careers, and they're able to offer a certain amount of money that is appealing to somebody. So how is that positively or negatively, or a little bit of both, affecting what we're trying to do?
It's a little bit of both. You know, it's getting the horse a home, you know, potentially a good home if somebody's willing to pay for it. You know, they're investing in the animal. But it is tough for facilities like our TAA accredited facilities, because those are the horses that they can usually turn around quicker and that they can adopt out for a higher price. You know, most of them cap their prices, say at somewhere in the ballpark of $2,500 as an adoption fee, and a $2,500 horse at a facility like that is a sound horse, a good-looking horse, a decent size, or whatever. They're, you know, they're good for the discipline that they're going into. So, you know, it's good for the horses. It's hard to want to discourage it in a way, but I also want to be able to give my facilities that I work with, you know, opportunities for those horses as well. The one thing that I have to say, though, that is great with my TAA facilities is that TAA, like we kind of call these facilities our safety nets, because these horses down the line, you know, there's horses that end up in these situations we're talking about that aren't coming from racing, right? You know, racing gets a lot of this because you can look them up on Equibase. You know, you can look the last racing owner up on Equibase. There's no rules for somebody that adopts a horse necessarily to be a show horse or to be a polo pony or something, and those horses can end up in kill pens too. But with our TAA facilities, they know, these people that adopt these horses know that if they're in a bind, the horse doesn't work out for them, if they hit a financial difficulty, if they're sick, they can return the horse to a TAA facility. That's in pretty much all of their contracts. It's made very clear. It's the easiest way for them to do that. And when a horse is purchased privately, you know, off of the racetrack, they don't have that same safety net, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, Pat, I'll get to you in just a second. But Jen, kind of the same thing, because you deal with a lot of retraining for other careers. So kind of just to what Jessica said quickly, you know, how do you navigate that? Because that's kind of your outlet.
I mean, I'm one of the people who does pay more to get those really good horses off the track. Well, I mean, sometimes they're ones that we've bred, ideally, and sometimes it's something that I just see, and it's a good-looking, big, sound horse with clean legs, and I'm happy to pay $35, $45, $5,000 for that horse, because I know if I can spend more time developing that horse than a TAA-accredited facility has the luxury of doing. I can spend 6 to 12 months putting a really good foundation on that horse and getting it in the show ring and giving it a resume so that I'm not selling it for 75 or 10, I'm selling it for $25,000, $30,000. So it's an economics thing for us too, but in a very similar way with the nonprofit side with us too, those horses that we make that profit on go to pay for the ones that we get back that we bred and they raced until they were 8 or 9. They had their joints injected way too many more times than they ever should have and in too quick of succession. So they come back with huge ocellates and limitations. And like you said, nobody is clamoring for those horses. So with those horses, we're investing so much more than we can ever sell them for. So our goal with those horses is to get them placed in a reputable long-term home. For our farm, they can always come back, just like with the TAA-accredited facilities, because that's just the right thing to do. I know racetrack trainers don't have that luxury all the time, but it's the same basic model of those good ones need to pay for the ones that have been overused, over-raced, not cared for properly.
One of the things I'd like to point out quickly that Jen just mentioned, that she has the luxury of time to retrain these horses and to get more money and put a foundation on them. When I talk to trainers on occasion and I talk about donating money with these horses, they'll say, well, don't these facilities get an adoption fee for the horse? Don't they get paid for the horse? And the thing is the racing industry puts pressure, you know, not direct pressure, but it's an indirect pressure on these facilities to crank these horses through the programs so that they can keep accepting horses. They want to help these horses. Some of the people that work at these aftercare programs actually work in racing as well themselves. But they can't keep a horse for 6 to 12 months to try to get more money for that horse because they need to open up room for the other horses at the track that are waiting. So they're getting, you know, somewhere between $1,000 and $2,500. So no, you know, their expenses don't get covered a lot of the time, and that's part of the reason is that they have to get these horses through to accommodate more horses coming in.
One of the things I learned early on is that aftercare is not just a synonym for nonprofit. And the for-profit resellers and agents that exist out there are probably finding post-racing owners to larger numbers than the nonprofit space. There's one particular reseller I've engaged with who is individually selling acquiring and then reselling with maybe a little bit of retraining, more than 500 horses a year. And there are no individual facilities that are, you know, going through those types of numbers. What seems to be the case now is that as increased scrutiny exists, it's possible that the nonprofit space is getting less accomplished horses or horses that require more time, you know, to take some downtime in order to then be retrained and rehomed. Well, if the nonprofit space was averaging 3 months with a horse 10 years ago, it might be 6 or 9 months more time, more money, right? The money is not going as far with these horses. So there's an entire for-profit space that if you talk to a trainer, they know who's going to buy those horses, and they will get the best quality thoroughbred to go on to do something else, you know, the jumper prospect. And sometimes, and this is another shocker to me, was that in many cases, the best retired thoroughbreds who are competent to go on to do something else may touch 2, 3, 4 different owners in the first 24 months off the track. And it gets really difficult to maintain traceability as that process continues. So the first point of call from a nonprofit, if you buy that horse, adopt that horse out of a nonprofit, participate in something like the Thoroughbred Makeover, and that horse does really well, it's a prospect to be bought by somebody else for $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. And kind of keeping pace with all that information, we don't really have the technological infrastructure developed to the point where traceability is really solved.
And Stacie, I mean, the TAA has just, you know, come in and done a phenomenal job in a space that is very challenging. So I kind of want to open it up to all of you quickly and then save some time for questions. Challenges, what's working? What would you like to see more of from your perspective? I know we've heard this a lot. What do we need? I don't want to know what we need. What are we going to do?
Well, I think we don't need to switch course. I think it's important to remember that with 38 racing jurisdictions, we have to wait to prove ourselves and say, yes, this works. And then, you know, it's been my experience that our team, we'll get a call. Emily, especially this year, has had, you know, one more racetrack or one more breeding farm or a conversation. And those are trickling in because people are confident in the TA. When we first started, who were we? Why would you go and say, yes, we're going to fund this? It had to be proven. I think it's been proven, and there's a lot of good people behind it. The Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance has, on average, 85 organizations accredited with 120 facilities at any given time. So this is fabulous, and making them stronger individually. I don't think we can blanket say, well, this one solution is going to solve everything for all, because we do have dynamics that are different. We have climate dynamics that are different. Hay is considerably more expensive in California than it is in Kentucky or in Canada. It is very expensive to find land in California. We were at a farm yesterday. I encourage everyone in this room to tell everyone you know to go to a facility in your state. There's a little place 20 minutes down the road, Desert Oasis, charming as anything, 20 horses, neat as a pin. The woman couldn't be working harder. And it's inspiring because you go, hey, that was a Speightstown. There's an Uncle Mo. These are great things to see. And so we need to lean into that. And I think let people make their own decision to participate. These, by the way, these are not our horses, right? These belong to someone. And we all benefit from that ownership that someone has in these horses. As an industry, we need to get behind it, and every entity of the industry, and we need to share the community that this is actually a win. We've all done really well. It's great to have RRP and all that event. The TA is very supportive of the RRP, and we're very supportive of our placement programs. We love our placement programs. Having a relationship with Raina and Lucinda at Karma and Jessica in New York, this is wonderful because we have a common goal. Once a month, the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance has an organizations committee call, and the group gets on there. And we have no less than 25 groups once a month come on and talk. And it's confidence, right? They can talk about what they want. I'm mad at you, Stacie. You didn't do this enough for us, Emily, whatever. Or they can say, this worked for us. And during COVID, that was really helpful. So I think, I don't want to get too much like the barns burning. I think we definitely are on the right path, and we need to stay positive about that, but we need to keep the foot on the pedal. We need to stay active, we need to be inclusive, and we need to respect everything that all of these groups have done, because they've all done wonderful jobs way before the TA was here.
So we're close on time here, and I know Robert wanted to make sure everybody could get that needed to the mentor luncheon, but I want to open it up for some questions. We have just about almost 10 minutes. I know there's so much to this subject, so broad. Yes. We could all talk for a long time. So if anybody in the audience has some questions for this incredible panel. Oh, Jessica. Can't see you behind the podium.
I'm little. Big mouth, but little. So there's so much great work being done throughout the industry for safety, for aftercare, and you all have touched upon some of those great things. Jen, my question is for you. You mentioned a conversation you had with someone who didn't know much about racing, but their first impression was a negative one. What can we do to, as an industry, to kind of help showcase all of the great work that is being done?
Well, I think we touched on this earlier too. It's a really important question that you're asking. I think the marketing and PR aspect, I hear this criticism across so many parts of the industry that we sometimes just get stuck in our own little vacuum and we're not letting the general public know the good that's going on and everything the industry is doing in terms of aftercare, in terms of equine welfare and safety. You have been instrumental in the program Safety Runs First, which helps a lot of the general public and equestrian public understand all of the safety measures that are going on at the racetracks. I think that kind of stuff is really important. From my perspective, outside the industry as an equestrian, we really need to change this mindset that non-racing equestrians have of horses coming off of the track are more or less either hurt or crazy. We all know that that's not the case. I very much know that's not the case, but that is the perception, and that's why there's so many people who are just hell-bent on either their students or themselves having thoroughbreds off the track. You'll see people put posts on Facebook all the time looking for a certain type of horse for a certain client, that they want a jumper that's this size and this age and this experience level, and at the bottom of the ad you'll see no thoroughbreds, please. There's such a bias in the equestrian world, and we need to do a better job of educating people, not only about what these horses can do and how great they are, that's awesome, but what the racing industry is doing to protect them and make sure that they have safe, viable careers on the track and they are retiring sound and capable of a second career. I think it's really important.
Can I say something to that too? I think what we really need to lean into too is medication reform. Whether you like it or not, it's happened, and it's made a big difference in aftercare. It's made that horse easier to retrain. We don't have horses on Winstrol and equipoise anymore. When they come back to the barn, you don't have to throw them out for a year and then try the saddle on them, because literally that's what you had to do 15 years ago. Now we don't have to do that. The horse is more sane. We need to, because people weren't wrong about the thoroughbred coming off the track that had spent 2 years on equipoise.
Question?
Hi, I'm Nicole Forbes. I'm intimately involved in this space. I have my own thoroughbred mare who was a failed brood mare who came from an auction and that whole space. I'm also an RTIP alum, and we met with some of the current students this Monday, and I was astounded by how many of them joined the program from actually learning or owning their own off-track thoroughbred. They had not been exposed to racing in any other capacity, and now they're in our sport. They want to be veterinarians. They want to be in marketing, and that first touch point brought them back. So I just want to thank you all for what you do. And again, it's that positive churn is coming back. So thank you.
Thanks.
Just to that point, Jill, I think there's a way, what Nicole has experienced, we could be flipping the script and the greater retired racehorse ecosystem could be used as a way to engage people more in racing, in breeding. Like it's not just a way station at the end of the road. It's a way that I think we can engage a lot more people, and I saw it through some work with the RRP that there's a lot of people that still aren't touching racing and have some doubts about it, but are happy to work with thoroughbreds in their post-racing careers. But it's a huge pool of potential customers and fans that we could still be engaging.
Brian?
Hi there. I'm so happy to have you a part of this conversation, Pat. So my question is for you. So you mentioned fees for the sales transactions. Have you considered breeding farms and stud fees?
Yeah, I started to get into that a little bit. We think the commercial breeders have to be involved. Our thought is based on if your stallion is standing for X, then and covering a certain number of mares, one stud fee a year. We thought $10,000 was the base kind of cap on that, $10,000 per year and higher above that. At current rates, based on 2022 and 23 breeding statistics, could probably generate a new $3.5 million. Now, in terms of this financial model that we're talking about, which it doesn't have to be the exact model, but someone has to put something down on paper and say, here's a potential solution. That money doesn't just have to be granted back out. You can build infrastructure with that. You can build incentive programs. You can drive people into the thoroughbred demand space. There's a gentleman in Paris, Kentucky, who has started on his own a new discipline for thoroughbreds to participate in a post-racing career called cross-country equestrian. And it is specific for thoroughbreds. It takes a lot of the rules that have maybe been to the detriment of thoroughbreds in open cross-country equestrian events and turn it into a thoroughbred-specific discipline. So the funding that you're taking for this isn't just going into the existing space entirely. Certainly some of it would, but you have to build programs, build incentives, drive demand. So the commercial breeders are definitely involved. We think the Breeders' Cup has to be absolutely more involved than they have been. And I alluded to Jockey Club full registration and registry transaction fees. They've been great. They've actually been really like the leader in organized funding for the TAA. It just has to be more, right? The costs have grown exponentially, but the funding has not necessarily met that, and the fundraising has not met that. So everyone needs to be more involved, and the commercial breeders are probably the ones that are most in need of going from where they are, which is pretty close to zero. It's not everybody, but to a much bigger number.
Hi.
We have 1 minute,
Okay,
and then I start singing and nobody wants to.
Margaret Ransom, graduate of the program. I have the Bridge Sanctuary in Robinson, Texas. I have 16 thoroughbreds. 90% of them are sanctuary, including a now 8-month-old foal. We pulled from an actual kill pen in August. My question really is for anybody. What do we do about the kill pen situation? It is, I understand, raising money. Hopefully we can offer owners, breeders, whatever, the opportunity to not get to that position where they're dumping. It is a crisis. It looks awful to our industry that we all love so much. How do we stop this? How do we get these people from dumping horses? What do we do? Because almost all of my thoroughbreds, all but 2, which were surrenders, came from the kill pen situation. I don't personally bail. I bailed the mare and the baby. But they were sent to me from the negative, awful kill pen situation. We can't leave them there.
No.
They go, if they don't go to Mexico or Canada, like let's just suspend that, they will go from auction to auction to auction, thinner, beaten up. I have a mare who we rescued. She ran in the Kentucky Oaks. Claiborne Farm will now change their sales policy because of her. They didn't know. What do we do? How do we stop it?
Jessica?
I think it's a really multifaceted problem, and it's going to take a multifaceted approach. You know, I know one of the big mindsets right now, and I understand it, but I don't 100% agree with it because I'm more of an emotional person, is to not rescue some of these horses because it's putting more money in the kill buyer's pockets and it just keeps perpetuating the situation. But I understand loving a horse and caring about a horse as an individual, and you want to save the horse. I would too. But I think one of the big things is starting before it even gets there, starting before the horse even gets to that. And that goes back to retiring horses in better condition. If horses are retired in better condition and they can be used for a second career, there is the demand for them. People, you know, want them. The problem is when there is no other job that they can do anymore and people are just hanging on to them and paying for them and need to get out of paying for them. So if they start out, you know, retiring, you know, if they start in the beginning, and that does, you know, that's a responsibility that we have in racing, is retiring horses as sound as possible. Because, you know, somebody up here mentioned the statistic. It's like 75% of their life is lived after racing. So if we can, you know, keep that in mind, one, it's a good business practice too, because I would want to hire you more than I would want to hire someone else to train, you know, that's got horses that are breaking down and not retiring sound. But I think that's where it starts. It starts retiring sounder.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I also think this is an ongoing issue, and there are more complexities to it too. I think we have to have some political intervention or regulation, and so that starts by just petitioning and writing your politicians, because those places, and you got to give Jim Gagliano credit, he actually went to a kill auction and came back and said to me, like, why is that not regulated? right? How is it, and that really, we're trying to save the day, we're being played, as Natalie will point out, right? We're being played by these auctioneers.
Financial incentive to do right by them ultimately, even the sanctuary.
Yeah, and I
None of
strongly
them got
encourage.
slab fractures, blown out stifles, that like,
Yeah.
they can't be right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like I said, we could all talk for hours up here about this subject. It's important to all of us. We know we have the same goal, which is to take care of our horses from start to finish in a dignified way. So thank everybody here.
Thanks,
This
Jen.
panel
Good
is
job.
phenomenal. Pick their brains. They are the brain trust of this. And I feel like we're heading in a good direction as long as everybody keeps, as they said earlier, rowing in the boat the same way. We're all good. Robert wanted to remind everybody back here at 1:30.
Thank you so much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.